Welcome back. I'm Alfred Lambremont Weber, and we're very privileged today coming to us from the Amazon in Peru, Max Egan. Welcome, Max.
Thanks for having me on, brother. Pleasure to be here. Been wanting to come and talk to you for a while, so it's great to be asked on.
Well, I just am very curious. I know that you're here to talk about something very specific and very important, but what brings you to that very special part of the world at this time?
L- Look, I just like it here. I'm actually here to work on a new film, actually two films that I've got in the making. There's one that I've been working on for a couple of years on the Amazon, on the destruction of the jungle that's happening here, and I need to pay attention to that. And I'm also working on a new one called Catastocracy, which is going to be part two of Transformation, which was a film that I made back in, I think it was 2014 or 2013, I released that. So I want to finish part two of that and just kind of have 6 months away from the city and just kind of try to relax here in the jungle and get a bit of work done, really.
Beautiful. Yes. We were looking at some of the trailers of your forthcoming films that'll look like they'll be out in 2017, and I hope that when they do come out, you can come back and we can talk with you about them.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be great. That would be great. Absolutely. It'd be a pleasure to come on any time, brother.
Oh, oh, good. Yeah. Thank you. Today uh, is something that is a bit along the darker spectrum that hopefully we can bring some light to it today. That for me was inspired by going over some of the commentary that I've watched on your recent uh, interviews on Press TV with regard to what's going on regarding the Paris peace process in Palestine and how uh, Israel has really been strategizing with Palestine, and the central word that keeps on coming up for me and for you, I noticed, is the word genocide. And that's really why I wanted to ask you to come here and comment. What do you mean by the word genocide in the context of Palestine?
Not really, the removal of the race of Palestinian people from the lands, the genocide of the people from the land of Palestine, really the ethnic cleansing of Palestine is what's going on. Israel has been carrying out an ethnic cleansing program against the Palestinian people since they founded the land back in 1948. I mean, the place was founded on ethnic cleansing. If you look at the Nakba, you look at how 750,000 Palestinians were displaced in May 15th, 1948, and how this has just been an ongoing process ever since. Look at what's going on in West Bank now. It's ethnic cleansing, it's genocide, pushing the Palestinian people as much as they can for reaction. While we see things like the Paris Peace Accord going on, we see all these meetings being held for peace. We see all sorts of activity going on in Palestine, in West Bank and in Gaza as well, where Israel is carrying out amazingly aggressive action against these people all the time, like bulldozing homes while it's claiming it's having peace talks. Just the other day, on the eve of Ramadan, you had 200 Jewish extremist settlers, march into Al Quds and threaten to burn down Al Aqsa Mosque on the eve of Ramadan. Just pushing and pushing. They came in protected by police. They stormed the mosque protected by police when there's people just in there praying peacefully, women and children and men just in there peacefully praying, trying to celebrate their religion. And you get the mosque stormed by 200 Jewish settlers waving flags. If you hold a Palestinian flag in West Bank, it's seen as incitement by the Israeli government, and you can be arrested. And yet you have Jewish settlers running through Palestinian areas holding Jewish flags, screaming out whatever they want, protected by police. This is pure incitement, trying to push the Palestinians into reaction so they can be portrayed as terrorists. We see a report on the news where there was a shooting and 4 people were shot. Apparently, a couple of Israelis were killed and a couple of Palestinians were killed. the whole concept that a Palestinian can even get a gun into a place like that after the most rigorous and degrading checkpoint procedures they have to go through is ludicrous for a start. But even if it did happen, what about the 200 Palestinian people that have been killed since the start of Ramadan, since Israel has gone in there and created all of this tension in Al-Aqsa Mosque? And they're doing all this while they're saying they're having peace talks in Paris. It's a joke. The whole thing's a joke. It's ethnic cleansing and genocide, and it's been going on for years and years. As a result of those shootings in Jerusalem or in Tel Aviv, we hear one rabbi calling out for ethnic cleansing of 300,000 Palestinians from West Bank, and another rabbi saying that they should leave no Palestinians left alive. And this isn't seen as incitement. And yet, any Israeli or any Palestinian who fights back, it's the death penalty. Anybody who responds at all to Israeli terrorism is seen as a terrorist and is given the death penalty. And Western media just pushes it. It's a blatant war crime. The entire situation in Palestine is a blatant war crime, regardless of all of the activity that Israel gets up to, regardless of the fact that they bulldoze homes, regardless of the fact that they're building settlements in occupied areas, and regardless of the fact they're using white phosphorus and banned chemical weapons and all this stuff. Just the fact that Gaza Strip exists is an open war crime, a breach of the Geneva Convention, Article 33, and it's a huge affront to all that it means to be human. It's supported by thousands upon thousands of politicians around the world. It's good to have these tribunals and all this sort of stuff and find certain people within there guilty of war crimes, but ultimately I believe that every politician in the Western world who is supporting Israel, while Gaza Strip exists, while that state is in breach of Article 33 of the Fourth Geneva Convention, any country or any politician that is supporting it is also guilty of war crimes and should be arrested. And we need to have tribunals and trials for all of these people. I really believe it's one of the most important issues that we face, and it's the greatest moral dilemma of our time.
Right. And what you're saying has I can say has actually been documented, at least at the what we call Tribunal of Conscience level by an entity called the Kuala Lumpur War Crimes Tribunal that was convened under the auspices of Tun Dr. Mohammed Mahathir bin Mohammed, who was for 25 years the Prime Minister of Malaysia, generally a progressive force, and using funds founded a nonprofit for peaceful purposes, the Perdana Peace Foundation, and brought together jurists from all over the world. I happen to be one of the judges, and under principles of the International Criminal Court, established a tribunal to take on cases where the ICC was not acting. In that case, war crimes in Iraq by the British and American forces under Tony Blair and under George Bush and his cabinet. And we held trials there and found Blair and Bush and his government guilty of war crimes in Iraq and in Afghanistan and in Guantanamo. And there's been some preliminary enforcement there, which I can talk about. But switching over to Palestine, in November of 2013, there was a similar tribunal brought together to go back to 1948 and just document all of the different phases of the genocide for the first time with eyewitness accounts and up to satisfactory legal levels. I was involved in contacting uh, legal scholars at the highest levels of law schools inside Israel, because we wanted to make sure inside Israel and inside the United States, at Harvard Law School, at Yale Law School, we went to the most advanced Jewish Israel supporting legal scholars to be the Israel Defense Council. And nobody would appear for Israel. So other counsel had to be appointed. And people can go online to criminalizewar.org and view the entire trial record, which occurred, and with judgment issued in November 2013, and with a large amount of press, and including articles on RT. Now, you would think that with that amount of power behind it, people would have at least heard about it. Here in Friday, June 10th, 2016, that finding would be making its way around in the Paris peace process and in all of these areas. Have you, Max, in your research or your coverage of this area, come across the Kuala Lumpur War Crimes Tribunal verdict that the state of Israel has committed genocide since 1948 forward, and ordering restitution and ordering the right of return and issuing all of these other orders?
Look, it came up on one of my news feeds a couple of years ago, and I did post it on my headline House, but I've never seen it anywhere on any mainstream news service at all. I've never seen it reported by anybody of any reputation, you know. So, no, I really haven't seen it come up anywhere. And even when I saw it, I was wondering how this was going to be enforced and what sort of process would be in place to arrest these people. I was told that I think George W. Bush or Tony Blair or someone, might have been Benjamin Netanyahu, was found guilty of crimes in Spain as well, and will be arrested if he ever sets foot in Spain. But I'd like to know how these things will be followed up and what sort of enforcement can be put in place. It would seem that even you can have a court like this, like an international court in Kuala Lumpur, populated by renowned international judges and people who are actually worthy for the job and people who have the credentials to do the job, and they can have this international court and they can cast this ruling, and yet it isn't picked up by anybody because it didn't take place in The Hague, or it didn't take place in one of the European courts, or with one of the people who we trust, all this sort of stuff. It wasn't the United States or Israel or France or something. So it's we pay no attention to it, So that seems to be quite interesting as well. I think it's a huge double standard. But of course, a lot of the blame to this must go to the mainstream media. Why haven't they touched on this? Why haven't they spread this information? Because the mainstream media is supposed to be the watchdog. They're supposed to be the ones who keep government accountable and keep the people informed. So why aren't they doing it?
Right. And in fact, at a crucial junction, right after this, right after the issuance of this, the former United Nations Special Rapporteur on the independence of judges and lawyers suggested that the tribunal itself has no legal basis and questions its legitimacy. The tribunal does not have a UN mandate or recognition, no power to order arrests or impose sentences, and it's unclear whether its verdicts have any but symbolic significance, which, legally speaking, runs directly counter to the Rome Statute and Treaty on the International Criminal Court, which encourages the decentralization of the war crimes prosecution process and the setting up of national courts. There are over 120 national courts now that have signed the Rome Statute, each of which has universal jurisdiction to try war crimes under the ICC, and that's a United Nations treaty. And the Kuala Lumpur War Crimes Tribunal can take its verdict to any one of those national courts, such as Spain, and said, here's my verdict, you go and enforce it. Take your court, Spain, and if as you said, Benjamin Netanyahu or any of the officers of the state of Israel ever set foot in Spain, they'll be arrested under this. So here you have the United Nations Special Rapporteur on the independence of judges and lawyers stating that this tribunal has no legal basis. He's doing it in error, and is stating erroneously that the tribunal does not have a UN mandate or recognition, which is false because it has a complete mandate under the Treaty of Rome, which established the International Criminal Court. Do you have any observations? Have you run across this type of gatekeeping that the United Nations has exercised before in the area of war crimes around Palestine?
Look, I think the United Nations does everything it can to gatekeep the issue of Israel and Palestine. You know, that's the problem with the United Nations. The United Nations is really a united dictatorship. You know, it's a group of 5 very powerful countries who claim the power of veto over everybody else. You know, the United Nations is a puppet show. You know, if it was going to do its job at all, Israel would have been put out of business a long time ago, and this thing would have been addressed. And the fact that they can say that shows that they don't even abide by their own legislation. They don't abide by their own rules. So what's the point of it? It's absolutely gatekeeping. And you see this all the time. Any type of action that's ever mounted for Palestine against Israel is always vetoed or gatekept or shoved under the carpet or brushed away. They do everything they can to turn a blind eye to what's going on there. You know, like the problem is, you know, you've got the state of Israel and you've got a huge Israeli lobby in all the main countries in the world. You've got huge Zionist lobbies in America, in England, in France, in Germany, right through Europe. The Zionist control is right through the whole place. So that's why we're seeing this. And Israel knows it's above the law and knows it can get away with what it's doing. And that's why it does what it's doing. But, you know, what we need is public awareness of this type of double standard. That's the only way we're ever going to get by it. But how are we going to do that without some responsibility and accountability in the mainstream media? Because that's who's selling the lie to everybody. You know, like war propaganda is what the mainstream media indulges in, and war propaganda is one of the most serious crimes you can commit because it becomes a plane. But without war propaganda, none of the other crimes of war can possibly be committed. So we need to address that fact because that's why nobody's hearing about this. That's a loud one.
Right. Now, I know that there's bandwidth issues and there's been just a bit of noise, but it looks like we're back. Now, you and I were commenting before the interview that here we're almost 3 years after the Kuala Lumpur War Crimes Tribunal issued an historic ruling and finding and verdict of genocide on behalf of the state of Israel after due process, after evidence, going back to 1948, and except for a few news articles, has met with the UN Special Rapporteur saying this doesn't mean anything, has met with a blank wall, and we were sort of going back and forth, and I know we're going to go but normally under normal circumstances, is this what you've come to expect of initiatives that go after Israel? Is this what you found?
Absolutely, absolutely. No initiatives that are mounted against Israel have worked so far, which is why there's been things like BDS come about, so that the people can actually do something on the ground themselves. But you're not going to find any governments that are prepared to mount any action against Israel. The question is, why exactly is that the case? And I would suggest it's because of the huge Israeli lobby and the huge Israeli influence that we see in Western governments. There's essentially a mafia, a secret shadow government, a secret shadow lobby that controls global finances, and that's who influences and controls all of our governments. And the State of Israel is playing its part in globalization, in the destabilization of the Middle East, and the destabilization and restructuring of Europe. And so they're just letting it do what it does. And it kind of needs the Palestinian people there. It needs to have them there so it can claim that it's got this terrorist threat at its door. If it really wants to, it could go and wipe out Palestine in a week if it wanted to. It's a very powerful military, and there's not a lot of people left in Palestine. But it needs to keep them there, nibbling at its heels, so it can claim that it's under threat by terrorists all the time, so that the West will continue to push money into the area, so it can continue to balkanize the Middle East and destabilize Europe to what it's doing. It's gotten a little bit out of control lately. A lot of these countries are starting to turn against each other, but I think it's theatre for the masses as well. I don't think we'll ever see any action against Israel until the people of the West realise that we have a criminal cabal that's taking control of all of our governments, and we reclaim our own countries and get this mafia out of our backyard.
Right, right. And and personally, I was sharing with you uh, the discovery that happened to me as a judge on the Kuala Lumpur War Crimes Tribunal. The that we made a discovery of the lengths that, and this is a hypothesis, but I wanted to get your comment on this, of the lengths that I call it the International War Crimes uh, uh, War Crimes Syndicate, or the International War Crimes Industrial Complex, or something. They kind of, their business is the creation of war crimes. The the International War Crimes Racketeering Organization. Now,
well, I refer to these people as a kakistocracy, brother.
Right, exactly.
Kakistocracy. It's a word that means it's formed by the worst element of society. It's when the worst people, the worst possible people in the job have risen to power and are ruling entirely in their own interest to the permanent detriment of all other classes. And it comes from the word kaka, and we know what that means.
Exactly.
So, kakistocracy, that's what we've got, brother. And it's global.
Right. Now, this is a documented hypothesis that I'd like to run by you for evaluation and comment, and it's one that was co-developed by myself and a colleague, independent scientist Loren Murray, who I believe you have met as well in the course of your international activities. And Loren Murray was a witness before the Kuala Lumpur War Crimes Tribunal as well on the subject of radiation. Now, the hypothesis is as follows, that the War Crimes Tribunal verdict of genocide against the State of Israel was handed down in November of 2013, and the false flag operation against Malaysian Airlines MH370 occurred in March of 2014, barely 5 months later, and that caused great international consternation and was a great embarrassment to the government of the Prime Minister of the party that was the same party as Mahathir, that is, and the same power structure as the prime minister that put on the tribunal, whereby they raised probably over $15 million for the 3 trials from the entire diplomatic community in Kuala Lumpur. I know I attended a fundraising dinner there at which all of the embassies were present and donated funds for the war crimes trials, except the embassy of the United States, and I imagine the embassy of Israel. And so this hypothesis says that the downing of MH370, which people can go to our websites and find programming articles and analysis showing, was actually done by U.S. Navy planes using directed energy weapons off of Singapore, and then it was, a lot of mystery to it, was actually a payback. It says, oh, Malaysia, you think you're going to try George Bush, Tony Blair, and the United States, and then the state of Israel for genocide? Well, wacko, here we go. We're shooting down your passenger plane and throwing your government into chaos, and there's nothing you can do about it. And we're using the most advanced U.S. Navy weapons, and it's just a few months after your judgment. How does that theory strike you, Max?
Look, it actually makes quite a lot of sense. It makes quite a lot of sense that if they were going to threaten Malaysia, they would do it this way, because, like I said, I did see this tribunal decision come up on my radar. I did see it in some news feeds in the independent media. I didn't see it on any mainstream sites, but I did see it in the independent media, and I was wondering how it was going to be followed up. And, the downing of MH370 has been a huge mystery as to why this has happened. There's been all sorts of speculation as to why and what happened. And that actually does make a little bit of sense that they would do something like that, just as a covert threat, kind of a shadow declaration of war against Malaysia, if you wish to proceed with this, if you will, something like that, and a perfect way to do it, a perfect way to close the issue, really, and to put the government in a state of turmoil. A very interesting hypothesis.
Very good. Well, it certainly feels that way to us as well. And here is for people on the international scene, including supporters of Palestine, supporters of international justice. I urge them really to look at the judgment of the Kuala Lumpur War Crimes Tribunal, both as to the state of Israel and as to the U.S. and UK governments in Iraq, Afghanistan, and Guantanamo. Are there any sort of general points that you'd like to make, Max, as to how people who are concerned about the abuses of Israel and Israeli power, both overt and covert, in the world and in specific areas like Palestine? What can people do, knowing the polarizations that Israel has made?
Look, the best thing people can do, I think, the most difficult thing is that people view this as either an ethnic issue, between something to do with the Israelis against the Palestinians or Muslims against Jews or whatever. They see it as a religious issue or an ethnic issue or a political issue. And my argument is that it's a humanitarian issue is the problem. If people can step back and get their whole concept of whether the land is Israel or whether it's Palestine or whether you support the Muslims or the Jews or the Israelis or the Palestinians or any of this stuff, put it all out of your head and just look at it as a humanitarian issue. You know, Gaza Strip itself is collective punishment. It's an area 25 miles long, 4.5 miles wide. It's the home to 1.8 million people, the average age of which is 17. Okay, it's child abuse. It's collective punishment and it's child abuse. And like I said, this is supported by thousands upon thousands of politicians all around the world who all openly support the state of Israel, while it is in open breach of Article 33 of the Fourth Geneva Convention, which names collective punishment as a war crime. So regardless of any other issue, like I said, regardless of whether there's been planes shot down, regardless of what's happening in West Bank, regardless of chemical weapons or whatever, the mere existence of Gaza Strip constitutes a war crime, and it's supported by thousands upon thousands of politicians all around the world who write all of this legislation on paper and inflict it upon us and claim that their legal system is real. Well, okay, if your paper-based legal system is real and you've written legislation which is going to allow a gas well to come into my neighbourhood and destroy my groundwater, what makes the legislation you've written that you're trying to inflict upon me, what makes that valid if it can be shown that that legislation was written by someone who is supporting an open war crime? You know, if your paper-based reality is real and we have to go by what you guys write on paper and call legislation, well, here's a piece of paper called the Fourth Geneva Convention, which names you specifically as a war criminal due to your actions under your own law. So please explain that to me, because we need to see what's going on here and establish whether you are a war criminal or not, because if you support the state of Israel, you are. And if you are, that renders all of the legislation you've written invalid. And I'm happy to abide by your legislation if it can be shown that you are a reputable politician who is upholding your office and not abusing the office that you hold. But the Geneva Convention indicates that you are, so please show cause why you should be held accountable for these war crimes that you're reporting and why all your legislation should not be rendered valid. Can you please do that for me? You know, we could do that with every single issue we face, especially in America, because every politician you've got in the United States has to sign the AIPAC Treaty, pledge, even to funding to run for office. So they're pledging allegiance to the rogue state of Israel while it's carrying out war crimes and breaches of Article 33 of the Fourth Geneva Convention in order to run for a political office in the United States. That itself is treason. Just the fact that they signed that pledge is treason, means they can be arrested for war crimes under international law and national law, because I'm sure there's a law in the United States that says you can't support war crimes or carry out war crimes. And if you're supporting Israel, well, guess what? You are. You're in abuse of your office. You're in abuse of the Constitution. You're in breach of everything that it means to be reputable and means to be human. And it's about time the human race grew a backbone and stood up and called this out for what it is. And if we don't do it, then the way of Palestine will be the way of the world. It's true. I mean, that's what's happening to the world. That's what's happening to all of our countries. And if they're prepared to treat people the way they are treating them in Palestine, then there's no hope for any of us. If we can't step into our humanity and call it, then there's no hope for any of us. You know, we've got to get all of this political jargon out of our heads, all this propaganda we've been fed by the media, all this propaganda we've been fed by our governments, and step into our humanity a little bit. Because this is the greatest moral dilemma that we face in the world today. And if we heal Palestine, we can heal every other issue that we face. I mean, I go on about this so often, Alfred, because I see this as the one issue, the one legal and political and moral issue that can be applied to so many thousands of politicians around the world. It's the one issue that exists on this earth that can be used to alleviate this whole mess and arrest this entire criminal cabal in one go. There isn't any other thing we can look at. There isn't the banking system or the crimes in Iraq or the crimes in Tibet, or there's so many things these people have done. The chemtrails, the spraying, they didn't name it. There's so many things they've done. But there's no one issue that then connect them all together and can name them all as war criminals and be used to roll back all the legislation that they've written. Because all of it was written by people who are all in abuse of the office that they hold, are all in abuse of their own law and their own legislation. And if law or international law or any law is going to mean anything at all on this earth, then it must apply to everybody. And this law says that they're all war criminals. And if that doesn't apply to them, then how does their law apply to us? And if it comes to that, and then they're not going to apply the law to themselves, and we can't use this legal system, then there is no legal system. And what are we going to do then? Have a global revolution? Because we've got to do something, because we are under attack from these people, and we've got to stand up and call it, and we've got to pay attention, and we've got to grow a backbone. And with things like the decision of this tribunal, this should be made public. This should be spread to every house in the world, and the people of the world need to stand up and call it and demand that there is a response to this, and demand there is some accountability from these criminals that have taken over this world. That's how important the issue in Palestine is, and that's it's a key to heal the entire world if we can look at it from a humanitarian perspective and a legal perspective, and get all of the ethnicism and all of the religious jargon and all of this other political propaganda and stuff out of our minds. Look at it as a humanitarian perspective and natural law. What is right and what is wrong? And what is happening there is wrong. And it's right for us to call it. And if we don't, then we can expect the same to come to us.
Yes, that is so deep and so right. Now, how can people follow your voice in this area? I understand that you have a podcast that you broadcast in this area, and you do articles and other updates and your art and your films.
Well, yeah, I've got a website called thecrowhouse.com that I put all my stuff on. You can find out everything about me there. I've got a weekly radio show called Surviving the Matrix that is on the radio and American Voice Radio, and it's also published to YouTube every week as well. I'll put it up there as just a YouTube clip. I do a lot of slots on Press TV as well. But everything is on thecrowhouse.com. There's a video clip that I did. It's about a 7 or 8 minute video clip called Save Gaza, Save the World, A Message to Humanity, where I outlined that plan and that breach of the Fourth Geneva Convention in about 7 minutes. If you can find that clip and share it with people, it would be great. I mean, and people look at this and they go, oh, you're pro-Muslim, you're pro-this, you're pro-that. No, I'm not. I'm pro-humanity. And I think that Gaza and Palestine is a huge moral dilemma. It's a humanitarian issue. It's not a religious issue at all. And not only that, it's a legal key. It provides a platform that we can use to apply to every single situation that we face. If the politician that's inflicting legislation on you can be found to be a war criminal under his own law, then what makes his legislation valid? And you can't just put a Band-Aid on the symptom that he's created. You've got to go for the root core of the problem and identify that these people are criminals. We've got a criminal cabal that's running this earth. We do. Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, Tony Blair, these people, look what they've done. Look what they've done to the world. Why be politically correct about it? Why do we have to beat around the bush and pretend that we don't know what's going on here? These people are absolutely disgraceful. They're disgusting, and they're running this beautiful earth of ours into the ground. They're destroying our habitat. They're attacking us. They're destroying our health through everything that they're doing to us, the stuff they're putting in the food, spraying in the air, everything they're doing. Vaccinations, everything. They're not allowing us to be a free humanity, and we need to address this situation. We have a clear and present danger, and Palestine provides a key for it all. So yeah, it's all on thecrowhouse.com. Everything that I've done is there. I've been pushing this message out for about 8 years now on air, and there's a lot of stuff there. All my films are there. All the radio shows are there. The show goes live to air every Friday night. I'll be doing one tonight, and it goes usually up on YouTube every Saturday morning. And the YouTube channel is The Crow House as well.
Excellent. Well, we really want to thank you for your work. We want to thank you for taking the time to look at the judgment of the Kuala Lumpur War Crimes Tribunal on the State of Israel, for putting your light and your moral weight behind its judgment, and hopefully together we'll be able to give it some life again after they tried to bury it with various false flags. So thank you, and we look forward to your joining us again in the future as events develop, Max.
Look, happy to, Alfred, absolutely happy to anytime. I think it's great what you're doing, and it's great that you're pushing this forward. It's great what this Kuala Lumpur Tribunal has done. And I think it is important for people to look at this and to push it out and to get it. send it to your media and ask the media why they are not addressing this. Ask them, would they like to be included in this war crime tribunal, because ultimately they should. Like I said, war propaganda is the most serious crime you can commit, because without the irresponsibility of the mainstream media, none of these governments could get away with what they're doing, and none of the crimes that we see in the world today, none of the war crimes that Israel is carrying out, none of these things could happen if it wasn't for the irresponsibility of the mainstream media and their failure to do the job that they are appointed to do. They're all in abuse of their charter as well. So these people should ultimately be included in these tribunals, I think. But thanks very much for the kind words. Thanks for asking me on. I love what you do, and I'm happy to come on and chat to you anytime.
Thank you.